Michigan is expected to self-impose a 2-game suspension for Sheronne Moore for the alleged deleting of text messages he had with Connor Stallions. Okay, so just right off the bat, you might be thinking to yourself, didn't we go through all of this suspensions and everything a couple of years ago? And yes, that is the case. But remember, now we're talking about really two different issues. So there were some suspensions that Michigan had with coaches, including Jim Harbaugh and some of the others, a couple of years ago in their national championship year at the beginning of the year, but that was stemming from some recruiting violations stemming back to COVID. Okay. So that's what that was. Then Harbaugh had the suspensions late in that championship year, and that was primarily because the Big Ten was involved. What we have never gotten is really any insights from the NCAA. And so they always take forever. Remember, the NCAA cycle, it's part of what makes them such a terrible organization is that they are so slow. And in a sport that moves from a cycle standpoint so quickly, they move so slow that we're like, are we still dealing with this? And the answer is yes. So as it relates to the Michigan football program and the NCAA, Michigan is trying to get out ahead of their meeting, which will take place sometime in June on infractions stemming from the Connor Stallions sign stealing saga that we were all a part of back in 2023. So some interesting tidbits about this self-imposed suspension for Sheronne Moore is that it'll be 2 games, and it won't be the first 2 games of the season. It'll be games 3 and 4. The home game against Central Michigan, and then a road game in the Big Ten at Nebraska, which means Sheronne will coach as the head coach against New Mexico, which is potentially, depending on how that quarterback battle all irons out, it could be Bryce Underwood's first start as a true freshman, so he would be out there for that game against New Mexico. And then he would then still be coaching when they go on the road to Norman, which, by the way, is Sheronne's alma mater, played college football for Stoops at Oklahoma, and he would be going back to face Oklahoma and still be the head coach, which would be potentially Bryce Underwood's, or by the way, any of their quarterbacks' first start on the road as a Michigan Wolverine. And then he would be serving that suspension against Central Michigan and then on the road against Nebraska. So choosing which games that you're suspended is, yes, 2 fronts. One, trying to get ahead of this infractions meeting that's going to take place in June. But it's also, let's be incredibly honest about it, it is self-serving for Michigan. This benefits them. To try to get out in front of it is one thing. To get out in front of it to benefit you the most is another, which obviously trying to get your feet wet, not only as, let's face it, a young head coach, but also with a new quarterback. You don't want to try to go through all of those gymnastics early in the year with this suspension. So get your feet wet as a team, in particular the starting quarterback, for the first 2 weeks and that big road test, Big Ten SEC, as Michigan goes on the road to Oklahoma, which, like I said, is Sheronne's alma mater, and then serve the suspension. Is that beneficial for Michigan? Obviously, yes. Obviously, yes, which is why they're trying to do it this way. Do I think that the NCAA is going to look through that? Yeah. Obviously, because it is the most self-serving way to try to get out ahead of what could be looming as it relates to a suspension coming down from the NCAA. Now, does this hurt them? Yeah, obviously. Folks, I keep saying this. Like, the issue that we run into in this discussion is that without rehashing all of the actual issues with sign stealing and the video evidence, which, listen, I've drawn the ire on a lot of different sides on this issue. When it comes to what we're going through now, the problem is governance. And I've talked about this, at length in different areas. But the governance of the NCAA is so archaic and so flawed that now, one, it's too late. And 2, do we really know, like, what type of jurisdiction the NCAA is going to have moving forward? I think those are both called into question at this point. If we could have a more singular body that was governing college football and college football specifically, I think that they could be a lot more nimble And I know that that's obvious. They could be a lot more nimble, and we would have already been through all of this versus dealing with it 2 seasons removed from when all of this started to come out. Right in the middle of the 23 season, you got Harbaugh's suspension at the end of the 23 season, and yet here we are going into 2025, and we're talking about Michigan trying to get out ahead of what the NCAA is still impending, or whether they're impending meeting in the summertime. This is no way to govern the sport. This is no way to govern the sport. This is a case study, and it happens time and time again where it's so painfully obvious that we need a singular overarching governing body over just football so that we can deal with things more in real time and less so like the Titanic looking way backwards and being like, we hit an iceberg way back there and now we're going to try to deal with it. And there's no way you can actually deal with it in any meaningful way, because what you're going to end up doing is punishing people that had nothing to do with this. Now, I'm not saying Sheronne had nothing to do with this. And again, these text messages were tampered with and allegedly deleted. That's terrible. That's a terrible decision. I've heard reports that there was nothing incriminating in those text messages, but who cares? You can't tamper with evidence. That means the cover-up is always worse than the crime in that regard. My fear with all of this, and we're getting into this area where as I get further away from the entire saga of 2023, what I start to think about, and maybe this is just because I'm a father and I've got kids that are getting older. My oldest is in 7th grade. He's going to be in 8th grade next year. He's a teenager. And I think to myself about like precedent and models. You know, the kids see everything and young coaches see everything. So in this industry, there are coaches that are trying to cut their teeth and they're trying to figure out how they're going to go about their business throughout their career in college football. And as I reflect on everything that we've gone through, the precedent is just terrible because in a lot of regards, it's like, hey, do whatever for the outcome and then deal with it later. But that's really no way to go about raising coaches in this industry. Now, is this the only problem in the industry? Obviously not. And is this industry filled with folks that are holier than thou? Absolutely. There's no question about it. We see it all the time. We just had the podcast dealing with the Nico Iamaleava situation at Tennessee, and Tennessee, in a lot of ways, rightly so, lamenting the fact that they were having to go through this like free agency all the time with Nico Iamaleava, and he's just about money and this and that. And then they turn around and tamper with schools' quarterbacks. You know, are those guys coming to open? So nobody's without fault. Now, in this situation, this was a more specific situation. Advanced video sign stealing is not right, and people should be punished. And then deleting evidence, that's wrong. That's wrong. And so something's going to come down, which is why Michigan's trying to get out ahead of this. Now, they're trying to get out ahead of this in the most advantageous possible way, which is exactly how they're rolling this out with a self-imposed suspension for the 3rd and 4th game. It benefits them the most for it to go through this way. Do I think that the NCAA is going to, look through that and basically be like, no, we're going to look for something more meaningful? Likely. I think that that's absolutely likely. So the hearing with Michigan and the NCAA is slated for, I believe, early June. The final decision from the NCAA is expected to come within 2 months of that hearing. Again, your internet's not slow. That's just the NCAA moving around at a sloth's pace. It's infuriating how slow the NCAA is, how bureaucratic the NCAA is, because we're, again, 2 years removed, and there are players on the Michigan team that had nothing to do with this. Nothing whatsoever. Did some of these coaches? Obviously. Should they be punished? Probably. And will they? Likely.
Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you liked this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel, and you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.